The air between us felt heavier than the night itself. Her voice had that quiet danger, the kind that doesn't need to rise above a whisper to make your heart stumble. "If you leave now," she said, her eyes never breaking from mine, "you'll regret it." For a second I thought she was joking, but then I saw the way her fingers lingered on the rim of her wine glass, trembling just slightly. Not from fear, but from something far more complicated. The dim kitchen light traced the line of her jaw, softening her face, and for the first time, I didn't see her as my best friend's mom. I saw her as someone who was trying not to feel what she was already feeling. Outside, the rain hit the window in slow, uneven bursts, like it was keeping time with our breathing. I could smell her perfume, faint vanilla and something floral, still hanging in the air from when she brushed past me a moment ago. The scent made everything around us blur. Neither of us moved. The silence wasn't awkward, it was loaded, charged. Every second stretched thinner until even a breath felt too loud. When she finally stepped closer, it wasn't much. Maybe a foot, maybe less, but it was enough to make my pulse stumble. I didn't know whether to look away or hold her gaze. The flicker in her eyes wasn't invitation, but it wasn't rejection either. It was something in between, something dangerous. Her hand brushed the counter beside me, close enough that the warmth of her skin reached mine. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that could undo a person if they let it. "Do you really want to go?" she asked, voice low, unsteady. I didn't answer, couldn't, because deep down, I knew the second I turned toward that door, something in both of us would break, something we wouldn't be able to fix later. And when she took that one last step closer, I realized I was already too far gone to walk away. But then the front door creaked open, and neither of us moved. The sound of the door creaking faded as quickly as it came, just the wind. But the silence it left behind made everything sharper. Her hand was still resting on the counter, inches from mine. The distance between us felt deliberate, like we were both pretending it was enough to keep things safe. But it wasn't. Not anymore. She let out a quiet breath, almost a sigh, and I felt it more than I heard it. My heart was moving too fast, like it didn't know whether to run or stay. When I turned toward her, she was already watching me. The kind of look that doesn't just see you, it reads you. "Sorry," she whispered, though nothing about her tone sounded sorry. "I didn't mean to." Her voice trailed off as her hand shifted, brushing against mine, lightly, like she wasn't sure it even happened. But it did. The warmth of her skin stayed long after. The rain outside grew steadier, the sound of it pressing against the glass. Inside, the air felt still, like the world had narrowed to this small kitchen, this impossible space between us. I tried to say something, anything, but the words came out as breath. She smiled, barely, and it wasn't the kind of smile you give to break tension. It was the kind that admitted it was there. Her shoulder brushed mine as she reached for her glass again. That tiny contact sent a jolt through both of us. One we tried not to notice, but couldn't ignore. "You always look like you're about to say something," she said softly, her eyes dropping to the floor, then finding mine again. "Maybe I'm afraid to," I said. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to answer, but didn't trust herself to. Instead, she turned toward the window, pretending to study the rain. The reflection in the glass caught us both. Two figures standing too close, trying to act like it was nothing. The seconds stretched, heavy and fragile. When she finally turned back, there was something different in her eyes. A quiet decision, or maybe surrender. And when her hand brushed mine again, slower this time, neither of us pulled away. The line between what was right and what we wanted blurred, and something in the air said we were about to cross it. The space between them had shrunk to almost nothing. Every small movement, a shift of breath, a turn of the wrist, felt amplified in the quiet. The rain outside had softened into a faint hiss, like background static to the tension that filled the room. She stood close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her, the faint rhythm of her breathing. Her arms were crossed, but her posture wasn't defensive. It was hesitant, like she was holding herself still to keep from stepping closer. He swallowed hard, unsure where to look. The light from the kitchen lamp traced her face in soft gold, catching the lines at the corners of her eyes, the curve of her mouth. She looked older than him, yes, but also steadier, like she'd already lived through every mistake he was about to make. "You should probably go," she murmured. But the words had no weight. They floated there, hollow, like she didn't mean them. He nodded, or tried to. His body didn't move. Her hand brushed his arm as she reached past him, pretending to set her glass in the sink. The touch lasted a second too long. It wasn't deliberate, but it wasn't an accident either. He felt his pulse jump. She noticed, he could tell by the way her breath caught, a sound so soft it almost didn't exist. When she turned back toward him, her face was closer than before. Her eyes flicked to his lips, just for an instant. It was the kind of glance you don't mean to give, the kind that says everything words can't. Neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, packed with all the things they wouldn't let themselves say. Her fingers brushed against his again, slower this time. The air felt too warm, too still. His chest rose and fell uneven. She exhaled, and the sound trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from something she didn't want to name. It would have taken only one step, one breath, for everything to change. But instead, they stood there, locked in a moment that refused to move forward or end. The world outside faded. The only thing left was the tension between what they wanted and what they shouldn't want. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound now, a steady vibration under the stillness. The rain had stopped, but its scent lingered, cool and heavy, like the air before a storm that never ends. He stood frozen, every sense wired to her. Even the smallest movement, her turning slightly, her fingers tracing the edge of the counter, made the moment feel sharper, more fragile. "You're too quiet," she said softly, almost teasing. Her voice broke the silence like a spark. He met her eyes. "If I say something, I might not stop." She didn't answer right away. Her expression flickered, surprise, hesitation, then something else. Something that made his breath catch. She looked down, a faint smile pulling at her lips, but it wasn't amusement. It was surrender disguised as restraint. When she looked back up, her gaze held steady. "Then maybe don't say it." The space between them disappeared in everything but name. Her hand hovered near his chest, close enough for him to feel the warmth of her skin, close enough for her to feel how fast his heart was moving. Neither dared to move first. The air itself seemed to hold them there, trembling with possibility. He could see every detail now, the rise and fall of her breath, the way her hair brushed against her neck, the faint tremor in her fingers. Every second was a tug-of-war between reason and whatever was pulling them closer. "You know this isn't," she started, but her voice cracked. The sentence died in the space between them. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world stopped. Then she took a slow, unsteady step forward, close enough that her shoulder brushed his. That single touch was louder than any words they could have said. The moment stretched until it hurt. Her lips parted, as if to speak again, or maybe to do something else. But just before anything could happen, a sound broke the stillness. Faint footsteps down the hall. They both froze. The tension shattered but didn't disappear. It just changed shape from what might have happened to what almost did. And neither of them could breathe quite the same again. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, neither of them breathed. The hallway light spilled faintly through the doorway, just enough to cast their shadows on the wall, too close together to explain. She turned her head toward the sound, but her hand was still on his arm. Every instinct told them to step back, to create distance, but neither moved. The weight of what almost happened hung in the air like electricity that had nowhere to go. Then a voice, distant, casual, called from the front of the house. "Mom? You home?" The words hit like ice water. Noah's stomach dropped. Her son, his best friend. Elena's hand fell away instantly, but the tremor in her fingers betrayed her. She didn't look at him, didn't say a word. Her breath came fast, shallow. The sound of it filled the small space between them. He wanted to move, to leave, to vanish, but his legs wouldn't obey. The absurdity of it all tangled with something darker. The knowledge that a second earlier, he hadn't wanted to stop. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, steadying herself. "Stay quiet," she whispered. Not a plea, a command. Her son's footsteps drew nearer, uneven on the wooden floor. Noah could see his reflection in the window, the panic in his own eyes. Elena turned, smoothing her hair, trying to look composed. The calmness in her voice when she finally spoke felt rehearsed. "In here," she called. "Just cleaning up." The doorframe filled with a figure. Her son leaned against it, smiling faintly, oblivious. "Didn't think you'd still be up," he said, glancing at Noah. "Hey man, you stuck around." Noah forced a laugh that came out wrong. "Yeah, just talking." The word hung there, thin and breakable. Her son nodded, eyes flicking between them, then to the half-empty glasses on the counter. "You too good." Elena smiled, perfectly, painfully. "Fine, just catching up." The moment stretched. The silence underneath it was unbearable. Finally, her son shrugged and stepped back. "All right, I'm crashing. Night." "Good night," she said quickly. They listened as his footsteps retreated down the hall, the door closing behind him. Then silence again, deeper now, heavier. Elena's shoulders slumped. She turned toward Noah slowly, her expression unreadable. The fear was gone. In its place was something sharper, defiance, maybe. "That can't happen again," she whispered. He nodded, though his voice failed him. The distance between them finally returned, but it didn't feel safe. It felt like a lie they'd both agreed to believe. She picked up her glass, then set it down again, her hand trembling just enough to spill a drop. "You should go," she said, though her eyes didn't match her words. Noah hesitated at the doorway, looking back one last time. She was standing where he'd left her, perfectly still, except for the way her breath caught when he opened the door. The sound of rain started again, soft and relentless. And though he stepped outside, he knew the moment hadn't really ended. It had only gone quiet, waiting to come back louder. The next morning, the house felt different. Quieter, colder. The rain had stopped, but its scent still lingered, like a reminder that something had broken overnight. Noah hadn't slept. He'd spent the night replaying every second. Her voice, her touch, the look in her eyes before everything fell apart. He told himself he'd leave early, slip out unseen, pretend the night before never existed. But when he came downstairs, she was already there. Standing by the window, coffee untouched, staring out at nothing. "Elena," he started, voice low. She didn't turn. "He knows." The words hit harder than he expected. "What?" "He saw," she said quietly. "Not everything, but enough." Noah's chest tightened. His best friend. Her son. The one person who trusted them both. "I'll talk to him," Noah said, desperate, but she shook her head. "No. You'll do nothing." She finally turned to face him, eyes red, voice steady. "This ends here. Whatever that was, it can't follow us." He took a step toward her, but she backed away. "You think I don't feel it?" she whispered. "You think I slept last night? That I don't want?" She stopped herself, pressing her hands to her face. "It doesn't matter what I want." The silence between them throbbed. Then suddenly, from the hallway, a sound. A photo frame hit the floor, glass shattering. They both turned. Her son stood there, pale, jaw tight, eyes filled with something Noah couldn't name. Betrayal, disbelief, maybe both. For a second, no one spoke. "Get out," he said finally, voice trembling but sharp. Noah didn't move. Elena stepped forward, but he didn't look at her. "Mom," he said, voice breaking. "Please." Her hand dropped, the strength drained from her face. Noah nodded slowly, grabbed his jacket, and walked toward the door. But just as he opened it, she whispered, "You'll regret this." He paused, not sure if she meant staying last night or leaving now. When the door closed behind him, the sound echoed like a final heartbeat. And from the other side of the wall, her quiet sob, or maybe a laugh, broke the silence one last time. Nothing would ever be the same again. Weeks passed, but the night never really left him. Every time Noah walked past that street, he felt it again. The smell of rain, the warmth of her voice, the way her eyes had looked just before everything collapsed. He tried to bury it, to convince himself it had been a moment of confusion, of impulse. But it wasn't. It was something far more dangerous. Not what they'd done, but what they'd almost done. One evening, he found himself outside her house again. Not on purpose, or at least that's what he told himself. The windows glowed faintly with light. He could see her shadow move behind the curtain, slow, deliberate, graceful as always. He didn't knock, didn't call. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, heart caught between guilt and longing. After a while, the front door opened. She stepped out, surprised but not startled. Her expression softened when she saw him, a mix of weariness and something gentler. "Noah," she said quietly. He opened his mouth to speak but stopped. Every possible word felt too small for what lingered between them. "I didn't come to," he began. "I know," she interrupted, smiling faintly. "I've been standing at that window every night, wondering if you would." For a moment, the world shrank to that small space on her porch, the echo of what they'd been, what they could never be. "You should go," she said finally, voice trembling just enough to betray her calm. He nodded. But before turning away, he said, "You were right. I do regret it, leaving." She closed her eyes, as if the words touched a place she'd been trying to forget. When she opened them again, there was no anger, no fear, only quiet understanding. "Then remember it," she whispered. "But don't come back." He nodded once, stepped back into the rain, and walked away. Behind him, she stood in the doorway, watching until he disappeared. A single tear tracing down, mixing with the raindrops. The storm had ended, but something else remained. A heat that memory couldn't cool, and a silence that said everything words never could.